Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Togainu no Chi. Last time, we went and met, I don't remember his name, but he was a guy in a white suit, he had a white mask on, and he was the only character that wasn't voice acted, really corny-like, when he really should have been, because that's what he looked like. But anyway, here we are with Keisuke deciding to participate in Akira, and Akira doesn't know what else to say. All he knew was that this was bound to end badly. But he'd made his warnings. If Keisuke wanted to proceed regardless, well, that was on his head, not Akira's. He heard the sound of footsteps approaching, and then a bright voice cut through the tension. God damn it. My headphones weren't in, you guys couldn't hear the music, couldn't hear the Rin's voice. Maybe you heard it through my microphone, I don't know. Akira turned to see a small shape in the distance, half obscured by twilight shadow. It grew quickly in size and clarity, finally resolving into Rin, who was panting as he ran towards them.
とにもあんのクソやじフラフラしすぎでさあちこち行きすぎなんだよもう
捕まえられたのか
そりゃもうさ見つけたさ当然てか自分で場所と時間指定しておいていないってどうなのってあれどうしたの二人ともなんか暗い顔して
Catching on to the mood, Rin cocked his head quizzically. Keisuke replied with a rueful smile.
大丈夫ちょっと疲れただけ
ああそうならいいけどさもうちょい休んでからにする
いや行こう
Rin looked back and forth between Akira and Keisuke for a moment, but then turned and started walking, beckoning them to follow. They followed the air between them, still strained. The glow of the setting sun died away as night fell on Toshima. They headed back towards the red light district. Apparently the person Rin had promised to meet was waiting in an underground bar along the first street Akira had explored. They rounded the corner, and there, Akira stopped. There was a crowd in the center of the road, their backs turned towards the trio.
ちょっと何これどいてよ通るんだからさ
Frowning, Rin tried to push his way through the throng. At first, Akira thought they might be eager spectators, but no, they were much too quiet. A peculiar tension filled the air. Suddenly, the crowd parted, revealing what lay beyond. A pair of tall, hulking men was doing something to a third man, most likely an Akira fighter. By the way they were handling him, it looked like a particularly rough search. The man was standing bolt upright, fully at their mercy. He looked as if he might burst out screaming at any moment. Finally, he'd had enough. With a pitiful shriek, the man broke away and tried to escape through the crowd. A deafening bellow rang out. One of the duo leapt on the man, seized him by the neck, and dragged him to the ground. The crowd watched this unfold without moving a muscle. Uh-oh. Where's their pet? I remember their pet from the anime. Was it theirs? It was someone's, and they walked it around. Oops, I just skipped a goddamn line. The brown-skinned man sported close-cropped hair and carried a grungy metal pipe in one hand. From the way his thick army coat bulged, it was easy to envision the physique beneath. How did his cargo pants bulge? His teeth were bared in a savage grin. The other man, approaching languidly from behind, had blonde hair, bleached to straw-like texture. His pink parka was thrown wide at the chest, revealing an extraordinary array of tattoos. The long bangs that covered his eyes somehow made his smile more chilling. That's a parka? Rin was frozen in place.
処刑人かよやべ許してくれ助けてくれよ
The man cried out, begging for his life. So these were executioners. Does one of them have a fang? Does the dark-skinned one have a fang? I don't like that. I hate that in animes. He heard the dull thwack of metal striking flesh, then saw the man topple the ground face first. Jesus. After skidding along the asphalt, the side of his face was wet with blood, tears, mucus, and drool.
逃げてんじゃねえよ。おい。
God, you see, this is what I'm talking about with all these throwaway characters being so effing corny. And their lines just being... It just takes me out of it. It's so bad. It's like, is it supposed to just be funny? Because it feels like that's what they're going for, but it's not landing.
自分のケツぐらい自分で拭けってな。ママに習っただろ？なあ。
Fear warped the man's face. He cowered on the ground, trembling.
あの黒いのがキリオで金髪が軍事っての。あいつらには気をつけなよ。気まぐれだしいい加減だし、違反してなくても言いがかりつけて殺しちゃう時あるから。
Rain spat the words with contempt. Meanwhile, a pale Keisuke watched in frozen horror.
人を殺すことが快感なんだよ。楽しくてしょうがないんだあいつら。
The executioners laid into the man, kicking him again and again. Their laughter was like shards of glass stabbing into Akira's ears. What?
言っとけ。
Is this a sexual thing? Is this some kind of homicidal sexual murder thing? The sounds went on for some time. After a while, the man stopped screaming. Blood and foam bubbled from his lips. Had he lost consciousness, or has his soul finally been spent? A silence fell so tense that Akira could hear everyone holding their breath. They were all praying that their turn wasn't next. That they would survive if no one else. Run and the executioners would devour you like rabid dogs. No one could move until their inspection had ended.
もう終わりかな。つまんねえな。
The one holding the metal pipe, Kiriwar? Kirarwar? It is such a... What the heck is that name? Kiriwar. There's no way to read that in a sensible way. Let's just call him Kiri and save ourselves the headache. Idly prodded his twitching victim with a foot. The man's blood stained the earth reddish black. So that should be the man has blood stained the earth reddish black or something.
ごめん。ちょっとダメかも。
Keisuke was sickly pale. He looked away, a hand pressed into his mouth.
おいポーチー。
The blonde man, Gunji, turned in and yelled a name.
ちげえよ。ありゃタマだっつーの。
タマは普通猫につける名前だろ。
God, I cannot listen to their voices. I'm sorry. This is excruciating. While the executioners continue, especially the blonde, especially Kiriwar, he is especially excruciating. Oh my god. While the executioners continued their pointless bickering, a large dog came up running to them. Wait, that wasn't a dog. Uh-oh. Wait, that's not a dog? Oh. Well, in what universe do you even for a second be like, oh, look, it's a dog? Wait, no, it's not. No, you did. You know, you did not even for a second. Not even for a second did you think that was a dog. Akira, stop. You're just trying to play into the kink. God, you nasty. All y'all are nasty in this game. Oh god. He was a man crawling on all fours. His body encased in hard black leather. Hell to the mother effing yeah. Oh god. He was blindfolded, gagged, and pierced and scarred. The leather dug into his... In what universe could you even think this was a dog? He can't even walk around along the ground like a dog. He must have been walking upright, because his hands are tied behind his back. So he's walking upright in this leather getup, and Akira thinks, is that a dog? No, wait, it's not a dog. Akira, shut the hell up. You little dirtbag liar. The leather dug into his sickly white skin, emphasizing the contrast between them. Especially prominent was the surgical scar on his throat. The flesh around it was swollen and warped, a sight that made Akira shiver with disgust. How do you see his neck? Girl? Like, when descriptions just, like, clearly clash with the character's appearance the first time you see them, it's just, seriously, again, I just have to wonder, did the writers see the art? Did they know what these characters look like? Did the writers tell the artist how to draw them after the fact? But even then, the artist didn't follow their what's the word? I don't know. They didn't follow what the writers said to do, because you can't see his neck. How is he going to be walking on all fours with his hands tied behind his back? So, anyway, his other wounds might have served a decorative function or perhaps had no meaning at all, but the one on his throat had clearly been inflicted as part of some deliberate process.
後でご主人様に可愛がってもらいな。あれんとこ行け。
Kiri War's big hand gave the dog's head a rough caress, then pushed him towards the beaten man. The man's convulsions had already ceased. Wagging his non-existent tail hard enough to make it come off, the dog dove at the man and began rubbing him with his nose. Saliva dripped from his gag as he sniffed.
ああやってタグの所持を確認してんだよ。タグには特殊な匂いの加工がされてるから、あいつはそれを嗅ぎ分ける。そのためにアルビトロに改造されて調教されてんだ。
What? Okay, I guess just like we got human mutants in here. I don't know what this is.
生態は趣味で取られちゃったみたいだけど。
Everything Akira had heard made him doubt our Vitro's sanity.
あ、何？え？不正してねえってタグ全部あったってさ。
Watching the dog's gestures, Gunji burst into an uncontrollable laughter. Everyone watched, shivering.
まあ気持ちよさそうな顔してるし、いいんじゃねえの。
The man had died with the whites of his eyes showing. His mouth stretched wide open in fear.
タマさ、他の奴らはどうよ。ついでに嗅いでくか。
Kiri War's words made those around him cower.
タマじゃねえっつの。ポチは腹が減ったんだとさ。
Wait, I guess I got confused. For some reason, I thought Kiri War was the blonde one. Gunji was crouched down, with the dog pressing his head insistently against his knee. It was exactly the sort of behavior a real dog would exhibit. Had he completely lost his humanity? What could do that to a person?
今日は帰るかな。
帰って飯にしよう、飯。
Kiri War, who had a distinctive way of stretching out the ends of his words, shouldered his metal pipe. Gunji stretched luxuriously. Luxuriously? What does that mean? How do you stretch luxuriously? That, you see, just random descriptions that don't have any meaning in this game. It's exhausting to read. That doesn't mean anything. That's not something you can imagine. What does that mean? And then the two men started walking. The dog chased after them. Amid the petrifying tension that ruled the space, their carefree manner stood out sharply. As it pranced past, the dog abruptly came to a stop. Right in front of Akira. If the creature had been a real dog, he would doubtless have bared his fangs and loosed a threatening growl. Such was the ferocity of his sudden focus. Gunji tossed his pet a questioning look.
警戒態勢ってな、なんかあんのかよ。そいつにさ。
The dog had noticed Akira's tags. Akira had received them from Emma and Gwen, but Where had they gotten them? His heart pounded in his chest. I don't get it. Why the hell would Gwen even give them fake tags if that did perhaps happen? Like, from what we've seen, getting the tags is so easy. We just walk in, we just say, can we have some tags? And our Viscio's like, sure, yeah, put on this white mask, put on this gay mask, I'll give you some tags. So the question is, why would Gwen even give them to us in the first place, fake or not? It's weird. It seemed weird that when we found out how easy it was to get the tags. Whatever.
お前さ、タマが反応してんだけど。
Kiriwara stepped up and leaned close to Akira, bringing his nose to the other's neckline. Then he raised his face slowly and leered.
なんか匂うのかな
An intense glacial chill spread through Akira. The man was happy. Pure madness, more childlike than anything, shone in his dark eyes. The scent of blood tickled Akira's nose.
行くぞジジイ、そろそろポッツ連れて帰んねえとビトロが切れる。飯の時間だ。
Gunji gave a beckoning wave of his claws.
ああ
With a lazy grunt, Kiriwara rejoined his partners. As they walked away, the dog kept turning back. Though blindfolded, his eyes were staring straight at Akira. Once they were finally out of sight, the shackles of fear fell down from the crowd. Akira, who was no exception, exhaled the breath that had been trapped in his chest. That was too close. If they'd searched him there. Rin and Casey quickly made their way over.
危なかったね、アキラ。
焦った。本当どうしようかと思った。
The people around them kept throwing curious looks at Akira. Akira was no ordinary fighter. His goal was to annihilate... I forget how to pronounce it. Viscio? He needed to keep a low profile.
さて、とんだ邪魔が入っちゃったけど、目的地はもう目と鼻の先だからさ。行こう。
The crowd had begun to scatter, leaving the beaten corpse face down in the street.
あれはあのままなのか。
I mean, no one's gonna have fun with it. I mean... I mean, if no one else is gonna, you know... I could.
ああ、うん。死体処理も処刑人の仕事だからね。後で戻ってきて片付けるんじゃないかな。
Ah, so that's why he hadn't seen any corpses. The man's remains lay there, attracting hardly a glance, like nothing more than a strangely shaped stone. He had struggled and suffered, spilling his blood like water on the pavement. His cries had sent a chill down the spine of all who heard. But no one bothered with him now, even though he had been treated so cruelly. His was not like the corpses Akira had seen in the past. Those had looked almost as if they were sleeping and been buried with all due respect. Had those corpses too been defiled? Had they looked like this before someone had claimed them? Akira slowly closed his eyes, shutting out the miserable sight.
足元気ぃつけてね。
Bare, nearly exhausted light bulbs provided the stairs with a dim and mostly useless source of illumination. Was it meant to create some kind of effect, or was the owner simply unwilling to change them? With Rin in the vanguard, the trio descended below ground. As the bulbs swung and the shadows shifted, Akira caught glimpses of graffiti on the wall. Meal of Duty. Was that the name of this club? The same phrase was inscribed on a sign beside the entrance, though the sign seemed ready to fall off at any moment. The other graffiti was mostly illegible, but his eye stopped on some letters scrawled in pink spray paint. Pesikoshka. Ace and D had mentioned Pesikoshka before he left for Toshima, recalling their passionate spiel with nostalgia. Akira proceeded carefully down the last few steps. When he opened the back door that seemed to materialize before his eyes, a flood of deep bass punched him in the stomach. The interior was dimly lit, but colorful spotlights stabbed through the darkness in time with the music. The walls were a storm of flyers, with clouds of spray paint competing for space. Barely anyone was on the dance floor. There were people drinking themselves into a stupor. Groups engaged in huddled discussions, and even a few men tossing darts at ripped up gravure posters. Many had dog tags hanging from their necks, but no one seemed interested in starting a fight. The atmosphere was strangely relaxed.
ここイグラでは中立地帯になってるんだよ。暗黙の了解でね。他にもいくつかあるんだけど、ここが一番人集まるかな。
The city had deteriorated, but that didn't mean all of the lifelines had been severed. Akira supposed that this had been one of the few facilities to survive.
といたいた、あのおっさん。
The diminutive Rin rose up on tiptoe, peering into the shadows at one corner of the dance floor. A man was standing there, though from here it was hard to make out anything but the glow of his cigarette. Upon noticing Rin, he turned and raised his hand in greeting.
やあ、遅かったな。
いやー、処刑人に引っかかっちゃった。犠牲者約1名。
違反者が？
違う。
言いがかりか。それでもまあ一人で済んだなら良かったというかなんというか、仏さんには気の毒だがな。
Did the executioners really kill that many innocents? It seemed to Akira that Igor would be better off without them, but who knew what that nutcase in the mask was thinking?
まあね。つうかあんたさ、もうちょっとじっとしててくれない？用があるときえらい時間かかるんですけど、これ以上行動範囲広げたら殺すよ。たく。
Glaring at the man, Rin took something out of his waist pouch.
はい、これ。
おー、悪いな。本に切るぜ。
いっつも口ばっか。よく言うよまったく。
It looked like he had handed the man a photograph.
よし、これでバッチリだ。あ、
When the man looked up from the photo, he seemed to notice Akira and Keisuke for the first time. He stared at them, blinking in surprise.
なんだ、新人か？紹介しろよ。
今そのつもりだったの。こっちがアキラで、こっちがケイスケ。
どうも。
Keisuke gave a little nod.
この冴えないおっさんは元美ね。
冴えないのは余計だ。
The man, Motome, replied with a glare, but then blew a cloud of smoke. Akira had to agree with Rin. The man did appear scruffy. His hair was unkempt and his face unshaven. He was dressed in a ratty shirt and brown slacks. The cigarette between his lips completed the image perfectly. But then there were his eyes. Though they seemed good-natured at first glance, there was a sharp light in their depths. Akira wasn't sure what to make of the man.
よろしくな。しかし、なんだってリンなんかと一緒にいるんだ。うるさくてしょうがないだろう。
His sprite's kind of sad looking. His face is just... It's a little too long and... his hair just frames his head badly. His eyes look sort of sunken in and depressed. I'm sorry, man. You had a rough life.
うるさいってなんだよ。来たばっかだって言うから親切丁寧に案内してあげてるの。
そういうのはありがた迷惑か。おせっかいって言うんだよ。
あんただって人のこと言えないっしょ。おせっかい役の大好きなくせに。
まあな。
Motome laughed airily and took a savory drag on his cigarette.
その写真は
Akira indicated the photo with his chin.
なあ、これか。仕事でな。ちょいと使うんだよ。リンに頼んでたんだ。
仕事？
そうさ。ちょいとここいらのことには詳しいよ、俺は。
情報屋だってさ、うさんくさいってありゃしないよね。
Rin pulled a slim table over. It came up all the way to his waist. He rested both elbows on it, pouting.
情報屋？
まあ、いろんな情報を仕入れて、それをネタに飯食ってるってとこだな。
That explained his peculiar aura, though he seemed relaxed. That was like guise to encourage people to let down their guard. In reality, he was keeping close tabs on everything around him. People like that were often the kind who'd sell out their own friends for a dime. He couldn't be sure if that was true for Motome, but either way, dealing with him was bound to require caution.
情報屋ってことはイグラには参加してないのか？
Motome wasn't wearing a tag around his neck.
ああ、情報屋が殺し合っちゃ商売にならんだろう。それに俺は痛いのは嫌いだ。
豊島に住んでるのか？
え？あ、まあ、今のところはな。永住ってわけじゃない。
Motome shrugged his shoulders dryly, or drolly.
リンって写真撮るのか？
Rin blinked in response to Casey's question. Casey sounded impressed.
情報屋がネタに使う写真なんて結構重要なんじゃないのか？
ああ、別にプロとかそんなんじゃないけどね。下手の横好きっつうか趣味で撮りまくってる感じかな。
Rin fished around in his waist pouch and pulled out a silver object. In the lights sweeping across the dance floor, Akira could see it was a slightly old-fashioned digital camera.
じゃじゃーん、これで撮りまくり。アキラも一枚どう？
いや、
Akira was not a fan of having his picture taken. He tried to refuse, but Rin already had his camera at the ready. Motome smirked around his dwindling cigarette.
いいね。おいちゃんと一緒に写るか？
What? Girl, do I know you? What? I don't think I want to. If this gets me with him, I don't want that.
写真は好きじゃない。
What a weird thing.
その変なおっさんと一緒に写るのが嫌なんでしょ？おっさん、邪魔邪魔。
んなこと一言も言ってねえだろ。なあ、アキラ。
No, I don't want to have my picture taken with some old man. Some old man I just met in a bar. It's so creepy.
アキラ、撮るから笑ってよ。
What a pain, Akira thought. Finally, the shutter clicked and there was a bright flash of light. Akira hardly ever smiles, so chances were that the photograph would show him looking sullen.
アキラゲット。
Even so, Rin gave him a satisfied smile.
お前さんたち何か飲むか？でもここには大したもの置いてないけどな。
What the heck is all those bottles on the shelves? Motome crushed the stub of his cigarette on the table, then took a cigarette case out of his jacket and glanced across the dance floor. There was a bar at the back manned by a bored-looking skinhead. Something had been bothering Akira ever since he set foot in this place. Something about the eager participants, the men who were wearing tags. It was a look in their eyes, clouded yet clear. He couldn't really describe it, but he'd seen eyes like those in the CFC, on people who'd used drugs to amplify their strength. The drugs bought them a few brief moments of glory, but in the end invariably destroyed them. The children born during the war had neither memories of their parents nor a reason for living. Raw strength was their only solace. Seeking greater strength, they used drugs like candy. They didn't feel like they were doing anything wrong. They hadn't been taught to feel that way. Some went crazy from overdoses. Akira had seen a man bite his own fingers and drink the blood. Nearly every fighter in this place had the same eyes as that man. As he surveyed the room, Akira noticed two men at the counter behaving strangely.
あれは
ん？
Two men were huddled together, one bare-chested and covered in tattoos, the other one wearing a black leather blazer. Why is Akira just looking at a couple of queens on the town? What do you have to call them out? Like, what do you want? What do you want? They were each holding an ampoule about 10 centimeters long, filled with clear liquid. I hate this image. Somehow I just hate this image. I really do. I'm not sure why. Just the expression he's making with one of his eyes closed, his tongue out. The ugly piercings. It really looks like that could be something else in his hand. Something. I hate it. As he watched, they broke off the tops of their respective ampoules, drew the liquid into the plastic droppers, tilted their heads back, and sprinkled a drop or two on their tongues. You have to put it in a plastic dropper first? Then they closed their eyes as though they were waiting for something to arrive. At last, the veins began to bulge on their necks, arms, and shoulders, faintly at first, then more sharply defined. Blissful smiles played on their lips. Their eyes had the clouded glitter of addicts.
あれはラインだな。
Motome narrowed his eyes and sucked at his cigarette while answering them. Something's ironic about him smoking a cigarette while telling us about this.
ライン
ここじゃ当たり前のように出回ってるリキッドタイプのドラッグだ。一時的舐めれば神経が高ぶり、疲労感がなくなり、体が軽く感じられ、筋力もついたような気分になる。
特別他のドラッグと何かが違うってことはないのか？
At his blaster haunts, Akira had heard people claim that the drug from Toshima could work wonders. What Motome had just described sounded like every other upper, and that didn't square with its fame.
気分になるだけだったらね、同じなんだけどね。
Rin spoke with a knowing smile. Perhaps because he wasn't used to this topic, Keisuke was listening with rapt attention.
ラインは他のドラッグとは決定的に違う部分がある。気分だけでなく、本当に肉体能力と精
It
神
just
力が
turns
増
you into
幅されちま
Einstein
う
if you
さ。
take it. It's the miracle drug, apparently.
本当に実際に強くなるってことか。
No, not really.
ああ、当然一時的なものではあるんだがな。それに依存性が高い、禁断症状も強く出る。だがイグラの禁止事項にドーピングなんてない。参加するやつなんてのは鼻からドラッグ漬けみたいなのが多いからな。奴らにとっちゃ使わない手はないんだろうよ。
This reminded Akira of something he'd heard from Ace and D. A guy who never won a single blaster fight suddenly began scoring consecutive victories. A month later, he was found dead in his home. Apparently, he died of an overdose.
まあ濃度を間違えたり過剰に摂取すると死に至る危険な薬だ。うまく使いこなしてるやつもいるが、素人が手を出すと取り返しのつかないことになる。おすすめはしねえな。
Motome watched the pair by the bar with a bitter expression. The drugs must have been kicking in, as Akira could hear their laughter all the way across the dance floor.
濃度もあるのか？
ある。一般的に出回ってるやつは相当薄められてるはずだ。濃度が高ければ効果も強いが、体になじまんと苦しむことになる。ひどい時はあの世行きだ。
つうか、んなもん使わなくたって強いやつは強いし、ダメなやつはダメなんだっつの。俺は絶対使わないもんね。
Rin's voice was thick with scorn. Now Akira is beginning to see how Viscio made so much money. As long as Il Rey remained undefeated, people would keep joining Igra, and most would use Rhine in order to win. It was a well-crafted system, he thought. So he made this system just so more people would buy Rhine. Honestly? Like, what an industrious capitalist, right? He wondered if El Rey himself relied on the power of Rhine, or did he face his drug-enhanced opponents with nothing but his own strength and skill?
あれってさ、何が原料なんだろうね。よく見るのは液状だけど、粉溶かしてあるやつなのかな。
もともと液体らしいぞ。原料は知らん。
ま、俺には関係ないけどさ。
Rin raised both arms in a big stretch. He'd already lost interest.
なんか飲み物取ってこよう。アキラたちはなんか飲む？
俺は何でも。
ビール。
アキラは？
いい。
はいよーっと。
Folding his arms behind his head, Rin cut across the dance floor through the flood of bass and lights. Motome turned to Casey as he took out another
お
cigarette.
前さんはイグラには参加しないのか？
ああ、いや。
Do you have to blush? Casey cast his eyes downward, clutching the bare neck of his coveralls.
まだ迷い中ってとこか？
Casey fell silent. After studying for a moment, Motome turned away and exhaled a bit of smoke.
どっから来たんだ二人は。
CFC だ。
おお、CFC っていやブラスター発祥の地だな。やってたのか？
ああ。
ブラスターね。
Motome rubbed his jaw as if considering this. Finally, he gave Akira and Keisuke a sidelong glance.
ガキの遊びだな。イグラとはまるで違う。ブラスターの延長のつもりで参加すると泣きを見ることになるぞ。まあお前さん、アキラだったか。もう参加してるようだが。
いや、飽きただけだ。
Akira left it at that. He wasn't about to reveal his true reason for being here. Motome studied him quietly. He could feel that deceptively placid gaze watching for the slightest change in his expression.
飽きたね。ブラスターは確か殺しは禁止だったな。 人殺しでもしてみたくなったがん
What a weird man. His tone could have been interpreted as either mocking or provocative. When Akira looked askance, Motome grinned and blew a cloud of smoke.
ま、参加しちまったもんはもう止めようがないがな。リタイアはできん。
Why
あと
can't
は
you
死ぬから
quit?
勝ち上がるしかない。
Just walk through the Badlands, the old lands again. Who's gonna stop you? No one's gonna stop you. Just stop saying stupid crap that isn't true.
ろくな覚悟もせんで泣きながら死ん
People
でい
do
った
that a
やつを
lot
大
in
勢
this
見
this
てき
game.
たよ。
Like, who's stopping us from leaving? I've seen a lot of. Why am I reading that?
脅してるのか？
ねはあ、でもある意味そうなるかもな。でっかい戦争があったせいで麻痺しちまったのか。最近はスリルだなんだって深く考えずに死に急ぐやつが多すぎる。所詮は赤の他人だから関係ないんだが、覚悟を決めて飛び込んできたならまだしも、死にたくないって言いながら死んでいくのを見るのは忍びないからな。説教臭くなっちまった。
Motome smiled bashfully and scratched at his temple. His eyes narrowed when he smiled, giving him a friendly appearance.
とにかく参加するからにはそれなりの覚悟を決めろってこった。運が悪けりゃここ出て3秒後には襲われて殺されるかもしれないんだからな。うちのお前さんも別に止めはしないがな。悩んでるならもうちょっとよく考えておけよ。生半可な気持ちで参加すると必ず後悔する。
俺は
Keisuke had been silent all this time, looked up.
俺はもう決めてる。参加するって。
Motome tapped the ash from his cigarette as he gazed expressionlessly at Keisuke.
ずいぶん思い詰めた顔してるが、何か譲れない理由でもあるのか。
ある。
少なくとも麻薬王の地位と名誉じゃなさそうだな。
Motome made Keisuke glare and clench his
俺
fists.
は守りたいものがあるから、そのために参加する。
守りたいもの。
Cigarette between his lips, Motome folded his arms and narrowed his eyes, watching Keisuke with an unreadable expression. Keisuke seemed to be bracing himself for the next question.
何を守りたい？物か人か、それとも自分自身か。守りたいって気持ちは大事だ。だが、押し付けるだけじゃダメだ。それはただの意地でしかないからな。相手も自分も望んで初めて守る守られるの関係ってのが生まれてくる。それが成り立ってなきゃ一人で気張っても何も守れんよ。
Keisuke hung his head, his expression pained and clenched, his fists harder still. The conversation died there, and into the silence surged the waves of an upbeat rhythm that entwined with the deep chest-thumping bass. God, I keep mentioning the bass. Like, how good is the bass? They just keep mentioning it like it's the defining feature of this bar. Out on the floor, beneath the lights, the dancers seemed to change colors with each pulse of the beat.
そうだったとしても、でも俺はだからってじっとしてるのは嫌なんだ。
His murmur was lost in the music.
が、今日会ったばかりの俺が口を挟むのもなんだしな。とにかく腹だけはきっちりくくっとけってことだ。
That was when Rin returned, weaving his way through the crowd with drinks in hand.
お待たせ。
遅かったな。
バーテンのお兄さんと意気投合して話し込んじゃったよ。
After setting the glasses down on the table, Rin grabbed his own drink and raised it to his lips. The tinted lights made it difficult to distinguish the color of the liquid. Motome took the glass that obviously held beer.
何どうしたの？なんか深刻な顔してたじゃん。
ケンスケがな、イグラに参加するつもりだっつうから、おいちゃんがいろいろと忠告してやってたんだ。
Rin turned to Keisuke, eyes wide in surprise.
え？あ、そうなの？やっぱ参加する気になったんだ。
Keisuke forced a smile.
まあ、おっさんに口うるさく説教食らったんでしょ。そういうのがおせっかいだって言うんだよね。
お前に言われたくないよ。
Motome shook his head ruefully at Rin, then knocked the back half of his beer. Meanwhile, Keisuke gazed silently at Akira. Was there something he wanted to say, or was he waiting for Akira to say something instead? Uncertain, Akira held his tongue. He agreed with what Motome had said. He himself had tried to tell Keisuke something similar, but after Keisuke had rebuffed his warnings, he'd resolved to say nothing more on the matter. Besides, this silent pleading act irritated him. If Keisuke had something to say, he should just come out and say it. Reading someone's expression was no easy task.
いよいよ CFC と日光連の日本統一問題が深みにはまってきてるからな。内戦が始まるのもそう遠くはないはずだ。そうしたらビスキオは雲隠れするかもしれんが、イーグルはまず間違いなく終わるだろうよ。
まあね。
Rin nodded as he slurped up the contents of his glass.
でも別に今が楽しけりゃいいじゃん。ほんのちょっとでも夢見させてもらわないとさ、やってけないよこんなご時世。
まあ一理あるがな。いつ死んでも悔いは残さないようにしとかんとな。
そうそう。
一気で忘れてた。
Catching a sight of a clock hanging on the wall, Motome clicked his tongue. He drained his glass, stomped out his cigarette, and pushed himself away from the wall.
人と会う約束があったんだった。俺はそろそろ行くぞ。
はいはい、まったね。
Rin waved a hand dismissively.
俺は夜はよくここにいるから、何か調べたいことや探し物があったら引き受けるぜ。相応の報酬はきっちりいただくけどな。
Motome smiled shrewdly, then ruffled each younger man's hair in turn. What? We're not lining up to get ruffled by you. Get away from us, old man.
なでんなよ。
じゃあな。
You must have hands of lightning speed to ruffle all of us and not for one of us to dodge out of the way. He walked into the crowd, laughing until his tall shape vanished from sight. Well, that is where I'm going to end this episode of Togainu no Chi. So, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye, guys.